Hello, everyone. Welcome to Go Global World. Again, we have a podcast about something of interest of international founders and founders in the United States. Today, we have a topic about Midwest region in the United States, where we want to research and see the opportunities of that startup ecosystem. And for this reason, I contacted Propellant Ventures managing partner, Jason Jacobsohn, who has expertise about this region, and he personally invests in the startups in this region. So, Jason, hi, good to have you on our podcast. Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Great, thank you for having me here. So I'm in the Chicago area in the Midwest region of the US. I've been very active in the entrepreneurial and investment ecosystem for the last 20 plus years. And so I'm very bullish on the region, and I've spent most of my career on the front line supporting entrepreneurs and investors, been involved in a number of the programs as they either get launched here or come into this market to grow the ecosystem. So I'll just mention a couple quick highlights. One is I brought the Founder Institute to Chicago, which is a pre-seed technology accelerator, started out Silicon Valley and is now in 220 cities around the world. I've been running that chapter in Chicago for almost 11 years. Also, I teach a class in entrepreneurship at DePaul University in Chicago, and I launched Propellant Ventures a few years ago. We are a seed stage venture capital fund based in Chicago. We invest in B2B tech-enabled businesses located in the Midwest region. So industries that we like are healthcare, future work or metaverse, ed tech, supply chain, fintech, health tech, et cetera. We look at a variety of industries. We've made several investments so far, and we're looking to make some really good ones, hopefully here soon too. So happy to be here.
Well, sounds exciting, especially that you're developing that region. Everyone is focusing on Silicon Valley, and everyone is trying to get to Silicon Valley first. But we don't talk much about Midwest. And so far, I hear some good, positive news from that region, very interesting startups and projects. So my question to you, what tech ecosystem in Midwest has become?
It's actually very exciting. So as I mentioned, I've been in this market for 20 plus years. In the last 8 years or so, I've seen a huge growth, and it continues to grow. So as an example, we had almost $21 billion invested in Midwest companies in 2021. That's up from $11.5 billion from 2020. Huge growth. This pandemic has been really good for tech innovation. And compare that to Chicago. So 2021, we had $7 billion in Chicago, up from $2.8 billion in 2020. So just a huge growth. Chicago is the epicenter of the Midwest, but there's so much more outside of Chicago, but the bulk of the activity is in Chicago just because we're the third largest populous city in the US. But we have a lot of great activity here. We have lots of new funds that have been launched over the last several years. We have focused funds, whether it's focused on underserved founders, underserved companies. We have programs, accelerators that have been built here, but also coming into the market the last several years. So we're not a flyover region anymore, a flyover city. There is a lot of activity happening here. And, you know, the Midwest itself has some really positive elements of it. The cost of living is very affordable. We have excellent diversified talent here. 25% of the Fortune 500 companies here. We're the third largest public school system in the US. So for especially entrepreneurs that are building ed tech businesses, you've got access. We have some of the highest engineering degrees or computer science degrees out of any region in terms of, you know, college graduates. We have affordable talent. It's more affordable here than on the coastal regions to hire people. So a lot of great stuff happening here. And because of that, companies are relocating from more expensive regions to Chicago because of many of those things I mentioned.
Yeah, and if you already mentioned a few stuff of this, but since Silicon Valley is so so promoted, why Midwest and not Silicon Valley? You already mentioned a few stuff.
Yeah. So also one other thing I didn't mention. So we have all those elements, lower cost of living, affordable talent, access to big companies. We also have more reasonable valuations in terms of companies. Companies here are, as I said, you can get in an investment opportunity at a reasonable price, and where we may be a lot higher in Silicon Valley or the New York, Boston area. So that's one exciting aspect of investing in the Midwest here. But it just doesn't cost as much also for entrepreneurs to build companies. Also, entrepreneurs generally in the Midwest build businesses based on a revenue model. Actually, let's generate revenue and build it towards profitability. Once that happens, then some of the coastal investors come in and jack up the valuations. But entrepreneurs here are hard workers. They build businesses to actually generate revenue. And so it's great. We have hardworking people here in the Midwest, and especially in the Chicago region as well.
Yeah. In terms of startups, what kind of startups should go to the Midwest? You mentioned edtech companies. What else would you recommend to consider Midwest to go to?
Yeah, so one of the biggest strengths in the Chicago region is transportation and logistics space. So Elk Grove Village, which is not far from O'Hare Airport, is the largest logistics hub in the country. So you have a lot of trucking companies there. It's centrally located. It's near the airport. So you have that's one industry that is pretty big here. I'd say fintech is pretty big. We have the exchanges, the public markets. So a lot of innovation has been built around that over the years. Even before it was called fintech, we had a number of companies, 10, 15 years ago that have spun out of the exchanges. And fintech is still decent here. Anything B2B is really good. We have a lot of old line industries here that are ripe for disruption. I would say insurance tech is pretty big. We have a lot of insurance companies headquartered in the Midwest. We have several in the Chicago region, but also in Ohio, other parts of the Midwest. So, insurance, especially if you have experience in the insurance industry and then you want to build something in insurance tech, we've got a lot of resources here for that as well.
Yeah, insurance tech is, and fintech as well is great industry.
I'd say prop tech also. Chicago itself has a lot of real estate. I started my career in real estate, so we have a pretty big real estate market. So prop tech is, real estate technology is another area that I've seen grown.
Would you recommend 3D printing companies like 3D printing houses companies to go to Chicago instead of Silicon Valley?
Yeah, we've seen 3D printer. We've seen 3D printing companies doing things like that. It depends on what they're looking to build, but we have a manufacturing hub here. Also, we have something called M Hub, which is the largest manufacturing hub in North America, and it has a space that houses hardware, software entrepreneurs building physical products. There's a fund, there's an accelerator. So manufacturing is a strength in Chicago specifically. That's one of our old line industries that. So anything in manufacturing is definitely a good place to be here in the Midwest.
Yeah, and in terms of key trends in the region, you already mentioned a few, but the key trends that take into account as an opportunity for investors and startups, what this region can show as an opportunity for businesses?
Yeah, I'll go back to logistics. We have several billion-dollar valued companies in logistics in Chicago specifically, but you look at the region as a whole, you've got more. So logistics is pretty big, and as I said, Chicago area has the largest logistics hub in the country. So that's a logical one, and that trend, there's a lot of room for growth in that, but there's a lot of companies coming in that space. I would say, there's Web3, metaverse. There's people building stuff in those areas. It's still those are new industries to really explore, but we have funds that are specifically dedicated to Web3 blockchain. So there definitely is that. Also cannabis. We have some of the biggest cannabis companies in the entire US in Chicago. We had some of the toughest regulations to allow it to be legal, but we have some of the biggest companies here. We have like 2 or 3 out of the top 4 companies in the Chicago area. So, that's an area, and we have a fund that's been dedicated just to cannabis, and so more cannabis tech. But the fact is, that's a huge industry, and Chicago area is primed to be a huge player in that. They already are, but Midwest itself has a lot of different things too, but Chicago specifically around cannabis is a big market.
Interesting. Mostly the most regulated region in cannabis, and you have the most largest companies in cannabis in there.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, you're right. We have a lot of money here, so a lot of people were able to get started, with deep pockets.
Right. So as a startup founder, I would think of myself like, okay, it's cheaper to live there. It's probably some interesting opportunities in there, and it's still the United States with all what it gives. But in terms of access to capital, like investment ecosystem for startups, as well as a corporate ecosystem to do pilots. What can you say about that? So what kind of funds is there at pre-seed and seed level? And what companies are willing to give pilot programs for startups to do some traction?
Yeah, so as a founder, there's a lot of hustle, right? You have to work hard to get capital, get companies interested in piloting you. So the good news is we've had a lot of new funds specifically open up in the region over the last 5-6 years. And these are early seed, there's later stage funds. So we found a gap when we launched Propellant Ventures. We need more funds at our stage. We do pre-seed and early seed. So really post a true angel round. And then right before a larger seed round. So we fill that gap, but we invest with angels and VCs. And so there are a lot of these funds out there. There are more angel groups around as well. There are individual angels. So the capital is there. If you have a good opportunity, the capital is there, but you've got to leverage the network to find it. So that part is still extremely important. And in terms of, we have a lot of large companies, as I mentioned, in Chicago region or Illinois, we have 25% Fortune 500 companies, and you've got to find a way in, right? I mean, it's relationships. There are enough companies out here that you could get these pilots, but you're going against the old companies that are not always open to innovation. But the good news is, especially the last 2 years, the pandemic has accelerated adoption for all this technology, and these companies need to address these gaps and these needs, otherwise they may be left behind. So, more corporate venture capital is opened up. We've had it before, it closed, it's back up again. And so they're looking to invest in innovative companies that could be strategic for their companies. So there's enough companies here, but you still got to work hard to get in because it's not easy, regardless where you're at. But the region itself has a ton of big companies, and even in the education space, we've got a lot of public schools. If you're in the ed tech space, we also have the second highest region, or Chicago specifically is the second highest concentration of universities per capita outside of Boston.
Oh wow!
And so there's opportunities for that level of innovation around the second, post-secondary or the college market as well.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. It's a good pool for talents, I guess, because many universities provide lots of talented people. And
yeah, exactly. So the talent is here, absolutely.
Yeah. So now we have lots of startup ecosystems around the world, and local governments provide some benefits and some stimulus for startups. My question is that what are the benefits of starting a startup from Midwest for international and US founders, such as government stimulus, preferences for international founders, visa support, incorporation, anything on that?
Well, cost of living, as I mentioned, is reasonable. We are centrally located. I mean, we're not too far from New York. We're not super far from, California. We're not quite in the middle of the country, but we're close. And so we have one of the busiest, if not the busiest airports in the US. And, so we've got a good transportation system here. So you have access to get to different places in this country, and a lot of support here. People want businesses to relocate here to do business with Chicago companies. So we have an organization called World Business Chicago that is trying to get companies to relocate to Chicago, but also do business with companies in the Chicago area. Now, I know we're talking about the entire Midwest, but Chicago is still the epicenter of the Midwest, and you can get to different parts of the Midwest as well. Yeah. So, there's different parts of the Midwest. Different cities have incentives for companies to relocate there, where maybe there's some tax breaks. Mm-hmm. There's some money that they give you. So every city is a little bit different, but there are incentives to grow the ecosystem in multiple cities. So, yeah, there opportunities are there, but you just have to know where to look.
Yeah, and in terms of grants, I guess it's as everywhere in the United States, or maybe some grant programs for this region are also available for startups.
Yeah, so grants are not as common here. You've got SBIR, the government grants if you're doing research, but but you may have to be US based for that. I'm not entirely sure with that. But there aren't many grants that are, some programs, like some entrepreneurial resources in some regions do offer grants just to get you to move to their region, but there's not a lot of that, not as much as probably hope for, but there are some public-private partnerships where there's funding involved in different cities, where it could be non-dilutive funding, so it's a grant, but there's not necessarily one location to look for, but each city generally has one main resource that you can look into these things.
Yeah, well, we spoke about the benefits. Now let's talk about downsides of Midwest ecosystem for international and US startups. For example, Silicon Valley is great to offer many stuff, but it's very expensive to live in. It's very expensive talents and lots of things where probably your region is winning over there. But what are the downsides of Midwest for international US?
So it depends on where someone relocates. The Midwest is large. We have 11 or so different states, right? It's large. So Chicago has a lot of activity here, a lot of talent, a lot of capital, still small compared to the coasts. But you go to other regions of the Midwest, you don't have access to a lot of capital or talent. So depending on where the entrepreneur relocates, you may have a hard time finding those opportunities and customers even. I talk to entrepreneurs from other cities in the region all the time, and a lot of times they're looking to relocate to Chicago or a bigger city because they don't have access to that type of stuff. So, that's why Chicago has the biggest amount of activity in the Midwest. It's just a big city, right? Columbus is the second biggest city in the Midwest, Columbus, Ohio. So there's a good amount of activity there as well, but Chicago's still much bigger. So those are the main things: capital, talent, and even customers. You don't have to do everything in person for that, but it's bigger companies. It is helpful to meet with them in person. So I would say that those are probably the biggest areas of challenges, but all these cities and the region as a whole has been working to overcome that for many years. And it's much better than it used to be when I first came into this market 20 plus years ago.
Yeah, well, United States is built on immigrants, and many companies have been built by immigrants in these few decades. And it's changed the country and the whole world as well. So what about being a foreigner in the Midwest, key benefits and challenges, if you have something to say about that?
Well, as you mentioned, this country's been built on immigrants. There's a lot of exceptional tech talent that comes from outside the U.S. So if you are an engineer and you're looking to join a company or even start a company or bring your own company in this country, if you have that expertise of being an engineer, you will be sought after. And so that's one area that I see of strength of coming in with that background. But there's also just thinking on the investment side, there are, capital from outside of this region or outside of the U.S. Is more affordable for many people to invest in a company or even to start a company as a founder. So, it just depends on kind of what area of interest you have. But I think in this country as a whole, it can be challenging to get visas more than it used to be. I mean, pandemic has not helped things. I think hopefully things are opening up again soon, but I know that we were limiting immigration for a while with, and that's sometimes depends on who's the president or what administration we have.
Right.
But it's still critical for innovation is to allow immigrants to come into this country, because you're right, most of the big successful companies in the startup ecosystem have been through immigrants, founded by immigrants.
And it's so important to hear this from you as an American, right? Because we hear lots of different voices from the politics, from the Capitol Hill, and this is important to hear from you, just because it's a demand that has to be covered by the politicians to open the doors for foreigners to innovate. Well, okay, so there are pluses and minuses for any region, and here as well. Like I see a lot of advantages for Midwest. There would be definitely founders who would be considering coming in. What would be the first steps a founder should do to soft land in the Midwest at pre-seed and seed level, I guess?
From another country specifically?
From another country and from other regions of the United States.
Yeah, so obviously doing your research, finding who the big resources are. So there's a couple. World Business Chicago, as I mentioned, is supporting companies relocating to the US, to the Midwest, specifically Chicago, or want to do business in Chicago. So they have a lot of resources. They've also are involved in the venture community, so they can connect you to different investors. Also, 1871 is a big co-working space. They do a lot of founders work out of. They do tours. There's resources there, so that may be one avenue to go to as well. There's a lot more. And John, this is just Chicago. There are a lot more things here in Chicago, but I would check, every region, or every city in the Midwest. If you're looking to go to a region, there's usually like a public-private partnership who's foster innovation. There's, Kansas City's got something, St. Louis, they all have something. So do your research and then contact those organizations, and they can plug you into different people within the city. And then once you get here, just meet with people, get tours of spaces, meet with some of the influencers before you even decide to relocate, talk to people. And we can do things virtually, obviously, without having to do it, but talk to the people, get comfortable with, the lay of the land, so to speak, and start attending different events. Again, it's mostly virtual these days, so you can get a feel for it. And then you'll have a better sense of, hey, is this the right city for me? But there are these ecosystems, each ecosystem has these resources for the most part to help you figure this out. And then also reach out to people that you find online that are influencers in the community and just pick their brain as well.
Absolutely. And Zoom is built and other remote systems built specifically for that thing. And the pandemic gave us a lot of opportunities to connect remotely. Speaking about remote stuff, can you open a company remotely and a bank account in Chicago or in Midwest? And how would you recommend doing this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, most people nowadays are starting to doing it remote. So yeah, you can. There are mobile banks like Grasshopper Bank and others that that are built just mobile first. And so absolutely, I mean, it especially your team can be remote. So yeah, that's definitely possible.
Okay. And speaking about the basic stuff like taxation, cost for companies and individuals, Can you elaborate on that? Because every region, every state has different stuff to offer on this one.
Yeah. I think that, it just depends on, it's just typical U.S. taxes. So you're taxed on your tax bracket, your company is taxed. You just have to work with an accountant to figure that out. But the costs in general to start a company in the Midwest are going to be less than in other parts of the country. But you just want to make sure you have a good accountant and to help you figure that out. And then, it's just the typical things that you need to do when you're running a business is file taxes and also your personal taxes. But there's nothing unique about it here in the Midwest other than other parts of the country. It's something you just have to do either way. I'd say the costs are more reasonable here to do things, hire people versus the coast in the US, because just the cost of doing everything is a little bit more affordable here.
All right. And for those who is interested about taxation and tax rates and the optimal states, we have a video about taxes, filing taxes in the US and selecting the best region for the taxes. So go on our YouTube channel and just check it out. You will answer the questions for yourself, how to incorporate remotely and to choose the right state for you. But you can operate in any region once you incorporate the company. And so Midwest might be one of those regions you can be operating into. So before we can wrap it up, I have one question to you. And those who are watching us right now, please support us with a like button. So just please press this like button and we will spread this video among more of our viewers on YouTube. And you can also leave your comments below and ask your questions. If there will be good questions, we'll pass it to Jason to answer, or we'll try to address them ourselves. And if you help us promoting this video across your social media, it will definitely help us a lot to help more entrepreneurs. Well, I have one final question before we wrap it up for you, Jason. How being in the Midwest ecosystem helps you reach the US market and get US funding? So like if we consider this as a center point for the startup, like US is a huge ecosystem with lots of opportunities. Being in Midwest, how can it help?
Well, funding is not easy no matter what. But being in the Midwest, if you have a business that is doing well, as I mentioned, capital will follow regardless of where you are at. But the valuations, as I mentioned before, are more reasonable, so that is attractive to investors even outside the region. But what I've seen is as companies get bigger and bigger here, they attract the capital from outside the region, and those values then do get jacked up. And we have several billion-dollar companies as a result. So as you build a business to scale towards profitability, investors outside of the Midwest are going to come in and start investing. So you will get attention from the larger players. Your earlier capital will most likely be from the local investors, but as you get bigger and need growth capital, it'll come from other regions of the Midwest. And a lot of times it's the West Coast and East Coast.
Well, thank you so much. I enjoyed it a lot. And I think Midwest gives us some new opportunities we haven't known about. And Jason is the right person to go to Propellant Ventures website if you want to fundraise and be in that region. At GoGo World, we will guide you to the right people just in case you are trying to get to specific region of the United States or around the world. We have contacts in many places, and we can connect you with bright-minded people like Jason who are willing to help you guys to grow and build the innovative companies. Jason, no more question to you. Thank you so much for your answers and opening up this region for us. What would be your final statement, closing statement for international founders trying to build innovative companies around the world?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. And these were great questions. The Midwest region, I'm very bullish on it, is a great place to build a company. As I mentioned, it's more affordable. There's a lot of resources here, support resources to help founders build up their companies. So a lot of people are connected to help each other. So I would say it's a great place to get started. You don't have to spend a lot of money compared to other parts of the country to get started. So definitely, yeah, where most people are pretty down to earth here too. So good demeanor as in general as well.
And that was Jason Jacobsohn, managing partner from Propellant Ventures, and we spoke about startup ecosystem in the Midwest of the United States. Thank you, everyone. Subscribe to our channel, like this video, share it across your networks, and stay tuned. We will have more talks about similar topics or other topics that can help you build international businesses. Thank you so much, Jason. Please stay here, and I'm stopping the recording. All right, take care, guys. Goodbye.